Peter Alexander has been one of the most recognizable faces in American television news for the better part of 2 decades. On Saturday morning, during a live broadcast of the weekend edition of The Today Show, he told viewers what many in the industry had quietly anticipated for some time. He is leaving NBC News. After 15 years covering the White House and several years splitting his time between Washington and New York for weekend anchor duties, Alexander confirmed his departure in an emotional segment that caught the attention of media observers across the country. But what exactly led one of television news's most durable workhorses to walk away from one of the most prominent beats in journalism? The answer, at least the one Alexander offered publicly, is deeply personal. During his on-air farewell, the veteran correspondent said he had missed more than 200 Friday nights with his family while preparing for his weekend role on Today. He has 2 young children, and by his own account, the relentless schedule had kept him away from them more than he was willing to accept any longer. For a man who spent 15 years chasing presidents through the West Wing and racing to New York every weekend to anchor a nationally broadcast morning program, the calculus had simply shifted. Family won. That explanation resonates clearly with anyone who has spent time understanding how the television news business actually operates. The dual role Alexander carried was not a typical assignment. Most correspondents either cover a beat or anchor a broadcast. Few are asked to do both at the highest level simultaneously, week after week, year after year. Alexander did it from 2018 through his departure, maintaining his status as NBC's chief White House correspondent during the week while boarding trains or flights to New York every weekend. The physical and logistical demands alone were considerable. The personal cost, as he described it, was even greater. So the real question becomes, was there more to this departure than a desire to spend more time at home? According to people familiar with the matter, Alexander had in recent months expressed genuine interest in taking on new professional challenges. He had spent years watching the major anchor chairs at NBC fill up around him. Savannah Guthrie and Craig Melvin were firmly established at the weekday Today program. Tom Lamas had moved into the anchor seat at NBC Nightly News following Lester Holt's eventual step back. Kristen Welker, who had shared the chief White House correspondent title with Alexander, had been elevated to moderator of Meet the Press. Each of those moves represented a ceiling being placed, not intentionally perhaps, but structurally above Alexander's trajectory at the network. There were simply no larger chairs available for him to be considered for, and a man with his experience and ambition was bound to feel that eventually. NBC News management offered warm words in the formal announcement. Chloe Ahrensberg, the network's Washington bureau chief, and Matt Carluccio, the executive producer of Weekend Today broadcasts, sent a memo to staff on Saturday describing Alexander as a trusted presence with great range and a friend to many across the organization. They thanked him for his contributions and wished him well. The language was collegial and respectful, as these departures usually are presented publicly. But the business reality underneath those words tells a fuller story. When a journalist of Alexander's caliber leaves a major network without announcing a destination, the industry pays attention. And what is his next destination? That is the question circulating in media circles following Saturday's announcement. Alexander declined to specify where he might be headed next. He offered no clues on air and gave no details in subsequent statements. However, the timing of his departure has not gone unnoticed. MSNBC, which was once a corporate sibling to NBC News under the old Comcast structure before being spun off into a new venture backed by Versant, recently overhauled its daytime programming lineup. The network announced new 2-hour slots for Stephanie Ruhle and Alicia Menendez, but conspicuously left its 11 a.m. weekday hour without a named anchor. Network executives said details on that position would come at a later date. The gap in that schedule and the timing of Alexander's exit have prompted widespread speculation that the two developments may be connected. Whether or not Alexander ends up in that chair, his potential move to MSNBC would carry historical echoes that are not lost on longtime news viewers. Andrea Mitchell anchored a Washington-focused program on that network for nearly 2 decades. The 11 a.m. hour has long been a space where MSNBC housed serious, policy-driven coverage tied to events in the nation's capital. A correspondent with Alexander's background covering multiple administrations and 15 years of White House experience would be a natural fit for exactly that kind of program. Nothing has been confirmed, but the circumstantial alignment is difficult to ignore. What made Peter Alexander stand out over the course of his career was not simply longevity or work ethic, though both were evident. It was his consistent willingness to ask straightforward questions in the briefing room, even when those questions produced uncomfortable responses. Perhaps no moment illustrated that quality more clearly than an exchange that occurred during the early days of the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020. With the country anxious and confused, Alexander asked then-President Trump a direct question during a White House briefing. He asked what Trump would say to Americans watching who were scared. Trump's response was immediate and pointed. He called Alexander a terrible reporter. The moment was replayed across media platforms and became one of the defining clips of that era's White House press coverage. Alexander later reflected on what it was like to cover the first Trump administration. He described the pace as being like a 24-hour news cycle compressed into 24 minutes. The constant churn, the unpredictable statements, the rapid pivots in policy and tone, all of it demanded a correspondent who could process information quickly and remain composed under pressure. Alexander built his reputation doing exactly that. Covering the Biden administration brought a different kind of intensity. Policy discussions were lengthy and detailed. Alexander recalled that one early Biden initiative came with a background briefing for reporters that lasted 45 minutes and produced, by his own estimate, enough material to fill 25 pages of notes. Different administrations demanded different skills. He adapted to both. His career at NBC News stretches back to 2004, when he joined the network as a general assignment correspondent covering stories across the United States and around the world. He was assigned to cover the Republican presidential primary in 2012, a campaign cycle that introduced him to the rhythms of national political coverage at the highest level. Later that year, he was named a White House correspondent, embedding him in the beat that would define the next phase of his career. After a period as a national correspondent between 2014 and 2016, he returned to the White House in 2017 at the start of the first Trump administration, a moment when that beat became one of the most watched and most demanding in all of American journalism. His trajectory is not unlike that of others who have navigated the complicated internal geography of television news organizations. Tom Lamas, now his colleague at NBC News, left ABC News in early 2021 under circumstances that carried a familiar structure. Lamas had been anchoring the weekend edition of World News Tonight at ABC, a prestigious role, but one that left him without a clear path to the weekday anchor chair as long as David Muir remained firmly in place. He made the move to NBC News and eventually succeeded Lester Holt at Nightly News. The parallel to Alexander's situation is not perfect, but the underlying dynamic is recognizable. Talented journalists reach a point where the architecture of their current network stops offering room to grow, and decisions get made accordingly. For viewers who watched Alexander cover the White House through 2 Trump terms and the Biden years, his departure marks the end of a familiar presence during some of the most turbulent stretches of recent American political history. He was there for the pandemic briefings, the policy battles, the diplomatic confrontations, and the daily theater that has come to define modern White House coverage. He asked questions when others hesitated, he kept pace when the pace was brutal, and on a Saturday morning, in a segment that was clearly difficult for him to deliver, he told the audience it was time to go. NBC News has indicated it will rely on various staff members to cover Alexander's responsibilities during an interim period. No permanent replacement has been named either for his White House correspondent duties or his Weekend Today co-anchor role. For a network that takes both positions seriously, filling them will not be a quick or simple process. The White House beat alone, particularly under the current administration, demands a correspondent who is already known, already trusted by sources, and already capable of working at the pace the job requires. Finding that combination takes time. In the meanwhile, viewers will notice the absence. Peter Alexander spent 2 decades building his reputation for reliability, range, and professional composure in one of the most scrutinized jobs in American media. Whatever comes next for him, the body of work he leaves behind at NBC News reflects the kind of sustained commitment to serious journalism that his audience, seasoned news consumers who have watched many correspondents come and go, tends to remember and respect.